It's just one day until this year's historic presidential election, and Michigan is a key state for the candidates. We've got it all covered tonight: the state's role, voter turnout, women in politics, the hot button issues, and the local races that people are talking about. MiWeek is live in Detroit tonight for our special election coverage.
From the moment you wake up till you turn out the light, Masco is proud to be part of your everyday life. When you turn on the faucet for a cool drink of water, open a kitchen cabinet to set the family table, or freshen up a room with a new coat of paint, you do it all with Masco products. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. You know, we have finally made it. Tomorrow, our nation elects its next president. And this campaign has been brutal, eye-opening, polarizing, and historic. And in this last week, Michigan is in the middle of it all. So we decided to take our show live on the road tonight and talk politics with a crowd here at the Whitney in Detroit. And not only are we talking the presidential race, Michigan's role, voter turnout, and grading the media a little bit, we'll also turn local to the RTA proposal, the Detroit School Board race, what's on the agenda in Lansing, and where we'll all be on Wednesday morning. We have guests who will be joining us throughout the next hour to sort it all out, but let's start off with our contributors of MiWeek: Stephen Henderson, the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press, and Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News. Guys, we're on the road again tonight, right before the election, huh?
Less than 12 hours for the polls.
Yeah.
Oh, we should have a countdown clock on, like a lot of the cable news has on.
And this is pretty cool. They usually won't let Steve and I in a joint this classy.
It's a pretty highbrow place for
It
you.
is.
I like it, but I like that we're talking politics tonight here the night before the election. So we've talked about so many different facets of this race, but Stephen, let me start with you. What are some of the things that have stood out with you that we have gone through this entire process in electing our next president?
Well, I mean, you think about all of the things that have happened, all the things that have been said, all of the things that have been done 40, 50 years from now. I think historians will be looking back at this election as one that stands out from the others. I mean, you think about the historic election of the first black president in 2008 and all the sort of history that attended that. I don't think this election pales in any sort of comparison. I mean, the choice that people are making, the extraordinary candidacy we've seen on the Republican side, this is history. We're living it. And 40 or 50 years from now, like I said, people will be looking back at what we did and why.
You know, Nolan, even in the spring we were talking about that we didn't really even think that we'd see a Donald Trump candidacy, and now here we are right now with a race that is very close.
Yeah, and the one thing we really didn't expect is that at this point of the game, Michigan would be considered in play. We've got the candidates finishing up their campaigns here tonight in Michigan, and I've never seen that in the years I've been covering politics. Michigan's in the spotlight. We didn't expect it, and if Michigan's in play, I've said that all along, if Michigan's in the play, you can't predict where this election is going to go tomorrow.
And it's been interesting because Michigan has been in and out, and then last week you said, forget it. Michigan is not in play. But you had the president here, you had Hillary Clinton here today, you had Donald Trump here yesterday.
Donald Trump is using Michigan as one of the states that he thinks he can flip to find an electoral path to the presidency. It's one of only a few states. And so that's getting us more attention than we would normally have this time of year. I don't really think his chances are all that strong. Anything can happen, of course, but he's not led in any poll up to this point. Nobody really wins an election.
And yet, Steve,
very difficult to do that without that happening.
And yet, Steve, the Clinton camp sees something here, or they wouldn't take
they're
the
defending.
bait.
Right.
She's been here today.
Yeah,
Bill, Chelsea.
The president was here today.
The president was here. they see something. This is not just
they see Donald Trump
play.
making a play. They've got to ward it off. They got to get their voters out, and that's going to be the big issue here. If you get the turnout you're supposed to in Michigan, this is not that close.
And I agree with that, and I think Democrats have the advantage in the get out the vote. I've seen very little in terms of a get out the vote effort on the Republican side.
And we're going to be talking about that. Also, the fact that the Justice Department is bringing in monitors to take a look at some of the polling places in Detroit, Dearborn, and also in Hamtramck tomorrow, because of all the conversation about could this election be rigged and or the value of our vote right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, protecting people's votes is also part of history, right? For so many years, lots of people were not allowed to vote. For many years after that, we've seen systematic efforts to disenfranchise folks. The Justice Department is here to make sure that does not happen.
All right, and we will be watching. Okay, we have a lot coming up. You know, everyone talking about the election tomorrow. Everyone has an opinion about it, of course, about what issues are important to them and what they are looking for in a president. Take a look.
By y'all bashing each other, that's not giving us no picture of what y'all trying to do and how y'all trying to help us, you know what I'm saying?
I know I don't want Trump.
You don't just get fair opinions. It's pretty much biased, you know, one-sided.
Everything is social media now, and everything is like in the public's eye.
Skeptical about the whole big picture on a national level.
So it's kind of hard to take each side serious.
Just like a man can run something, a woman can do it just as well. So I think it's wonderful.
I just hope it better be peace, and whoever the president be between her and him.
I would like to see the country come together as a whole.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the key factors influencing the presidential race in Michigan. Help me welcome back some familiar faces to MiWeek. Dennis Darnoy, a Republican strategist, and Howard Edelson, a Democratic strategist. Guys, it's great to have you back. You know, we ended up talking, we had a primary show, and little did we know where we'd be now so many months down the road. Let me start with you, Howard. When we look at Michigan and the fact that it is so pivotal now at these end stages, what makes Michigan so important that the candidates are coming here?
Well, electoral votes, certainly, and if you want to win the presidency, Michigan is critical. And so for Hillary Clinton and all of her surrogates coming here, they don't want to take this state for granted. They want to rev up the base and make sure that there's good turnout on election day.
All right, I'm going to make sure that we can hear you a little bit better, Howard. But so when you saw Hillary Clinton coming in today, when you saw her speaking on the west side of the stage, you say, that's a good strategy, that's a good plan, or what'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was a good strategy because I think Donald Trump isn't doing all that well in West Michigan. So for her to go out there and consolidate her Democratic supporters and independents, it's a very smart strategy.
All right, I'm going to hand this off to you. I'm going to let you have that. But Dennis, go ahead and talk to me a little bit about what the Republicans' move is here when you're seeing them eyeing Michigan, and what do they have to? What does Donald Trump have to capture here?
Well, sure. We're trying to crack the blue wall that is the Midwest, and Michigan represents an excellent opportunity for him to do that. He has voters in Macomb that will turn out for him. What we are seeing is maybe lower vote coming out of Wayne, which he can capitalize. And if he can get that traditional West Michigan base, oh, I get it now. Thank you.
You know what? This is a funny thing. This is called pass the mic. Go ahead.
But if he can get that traditional West Michigan base to come out and turn out for him, there's a good chance that he could, squeak a victory here.
You know, when you talk about the Midwest in presidential elections, a lot of time we talk about the home of the Reagan Democrats, and especially looking at Macomb County. Do they still exist in some capacity? Could you see a little something happen there?
Well, the Reagan Democrats are a little bit older now, but there is that newer generation that has come through that are union workers, that trade is a very big issue for, and who turned out for him in the primary. So yeah, I do think that they exist for him. I think he'll capture them.
Okay, when you're talking about Michigan, Howard, people are now starting to really zoom in on Oakland County, and the fact that you've seen a voter demographic change a little bit there, and that could shake things up a little bit in the presidential race.
It can. There's the demographics, and then there's certainly Oakland County women, suburban women, and how they vote. And so it's an important county. Donald Trump has done everything he can to alienate women and African Americans. The list goes on and on. So that is an important county for Hillary Clinton to take and Democrats to take.
So when Howard goes through the laundry list of everything he says that Donald Trump or everyone he has alienated, how do you think that his candidacy has still resonated here in the state of Michigan?
Very strong on the economic issues, very strong on trade, which again has a lot of resonance. And in the Midwest, the issue of immigration is one that plays very well. So, you know, Howard has his laundry list. I think I have mine. I think we could talk about trust issues and likability issues, but focusing on what Trump's doing is he's energizing people talking about economic and trade issues.
All right, biggest surprise, Howard, let me ask you, of this entire presidential race and how Michigan has fit into everything?
Biggest surprise probably was the FBI coming out and getting involved in politics, and in terms of Michigan playing in this presidential, is that it's still in play and that everyone needs to turn out to vote and vote for Hillary Clinton.
All right, we're going to have to see what the turnout is. All right, I'm going to let you have the last word, Dennis, though, in terms of some of the biggest surprises you've seen.
The biggest surprise is that we have both major presidential candidates in Michigan with 12 to 14 hours to go before the polls are closed. So that clearly shows you where the state of the race is. And as Stephen said, if the president's here, if Hillary's here, it's because they're worried.
All right, Dennis Darnoy, Howard Edelson, thanks so much for joining me, guys. Let's send it on over to Stephen.
All right, I'm here with Sandy Barua, who is the CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. Sandy, welcome to MiWeek.
Great to be here with you, Stephen.
Absolutely. I know you were, of course, a Bush administration official. You worked in Washington for a long time. You've been an observer of these kind of national politics for a long time. I have not seen anything quite like this before. I'm curious if you have.
Sure we have. You know, listen, I know people are really excited because, you know, the polls seem to be tightening, but that's kind of natural. I mean, we're a polarized nation. You know, the Democrats are the Democrats, the Republicans are the Democrats. We don't really talk anymore. So I'm not surprised that the polls are tightening. Obviously, the FBI news really kind of made that accelerated a little bit. But when you look at where this election is going to end up, it's going to end up on an electoral basis very close to the 2012 Obama re-election. It's going to be a slightly different mix of states. You're going to see Iowa potentially differently, North Carolina differently, maybe Ohio differently, but it's going to be about a 320, 335 electoral vote win for Secretary Clinton.
Yeah. The Trump phenomenon, which took over the Republican Party, which you worked in a Republican administration in Washington, seems like even no matter what happens tomorrow, it's not necessarily going to go away. There are a lot of lingering questions about what it means to be a Republican and what the party will stand for. Where does that all fall on your shoulders?
Well, for people like me, it means we start drinking more. I mean, you know, for Republicans like me who are Jerry Ford, George W. Bush Republicans, we really don't have a home anymore. And so tomorrow morning when I vote in my precinct, I'm going to end up this election cycle exactly where I started it 2 years ago. I started it voting for Jeb Bush. I'm going to write Jeb Bush in tomorrow.
But I'm sure that will make a big difference on the final outcome, Sandy.
For me, Stephen,
right.
It will.
Right. Well, I actually think there's a lot of Republicans who feel that way. But going forward, what's the sort of recipe for reclaiming the party in that center that you're sort of more comfortable with?
So the Republican Party is going to go through a process very similar to what the Democrats went through kind of in the mid-70s up until Clinton's election in the early 1990s. They were kind of in the wilderness, but they were strong on the congressional side. I continue to anticipate Republicans being strong on the congressional side, especially the way districts are drawn these days. But I think they're going to continue to struggle really for the next decade until they kind of find a new message, a new, you know, what's their new Ronald Reagan message? What's their new unifying message? I mean, people forget when George W. Bush ran and won in both 2000 and 2004, he got over 44% of the Hispanic vote.
Hispanic vote, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is not happening with Donald Trump this time around.
Yeah.
And that is the fastest growing demographic. And so when we were in the Bush administration, that was an audience that we were tending to and really looking forward. We were actually doing that with African Americans as well too. Right. But the party's obviously lost that vision.
Got to get back there. All right. Sandy Barua, CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right. Back to you, Nolan.
Hi. Thanks, Steve. Throughout this campaign, the conversation has been about disunity in the Republican Party, as Steve and Sandy just talked about. Some in the GOP establishment couldn't accept Donald Trump as their nominee. So where does that leave the Republican Party after this election, win or lose? Joining me now is Republican consultant Stu Sandler and Wayne Bradley, the State Director of African American Engagement for the Michigan GOP. Gentlemen, you heard that conversation. You heard what Sandy had to say. Is the Republican Party as in shambles as it would appear, or that folks are saying, Stu?
Well, you know, every political party has its fractured nature. If you look at the Democrats, they had a spirited primary. There are still Democrats who can't accept Hillary Clinton as their nominee. It's one of the reasons they have so many surrogates actually in the state today. One of the reasons that the president was here was because he's seeing depressed turnout, and he needs to get college students, he needs to get African Americans out. So there's fractures on both sides. Yeah, there's definitely fissures in the Republican Party, and if Donald Trump were to win tomorrow, then the Republican Party has a leader that that they will follow. And then on policy issues, if Donald Trump will lose tomorrow, then I think there's going to be some hard conversations like they had in 2008.
Wayne, is there enthusiasm amongst the Republican base about Donald Trump in Michigan?
Definitely. I mean, what you're seeing out here is just like yesterday in Sterling Heights, what, 15,000 people are there. Hillary Clinton has to pay people to show up at her events like that. She had to get Jay-Z and Beyonce there to get anybody in the room. So when you're comparing the excitement of the voters, Donald Trump definitely has an advantage.
Stu, you've been working with some of the congressional candidates. I've heard some of them express some concern about the Republican Party's get out the vote effort tomorrow. Where do we stand in terms of getting out Republican voters?
Sure. Well, I think, in terms of the Michigan Republican Party and the Republican National Committee, I think they have a top-notch program. They've always had a top-notch get-out-the-vote program when they had the right amount of resources. There was concern about the Trump presidential campaign that they weren't putting the right resources or attention, but I think that's been made up by the state party and the national party. And I think, what you're seeing now with all the surrogates here, I think you're going to see a robust get-out-the-vote for Republicans.
Wayne, you may have the toughest job in Michigan or anywhere in terms of trying to recruit African Americans to the Republican Party. Very low support in Michigan, usually for Republican presidential candidates. What's your message to African Americans to win them over to the GOP?
Well, it's two phases. One, I try to make the community understand that we're the only community that does not work in both political parties, and I think that the biggest detriments, and one of the biggest detriments in the African American community is playing by a one-party system. So really, it's about trying to get people engaged and making them understand that we have issues and they need to be addressed on both sides of the table.
But what does the Republican Party have to offer minorities, particularly African Americans?
I mean, our policies and the ideas of creating businesses and a better economy, that's for everyone. And I think that when you look at school choice issues, when you look at being able to protect yourself, Second Amendment rights, all these things that matter in the African American community.
And Stu, I know you are fairly convinced of a Republican victory tomorrow, but should Donald Trump lose, what's the process after the election in terms of knitting back the Republican Party? This election isn't the only thing they fought about. They've been fighting in Congress since they took the majority in 2010. How do you unite this party behind one set of principles, behind one set of leaders?
Sure. We have a resilient democracy. We have a resilient party structure. Just like in 2008, if Donald Trump were to lose, there'll be some hard conversations, there'll be some hard talks, but there's a lot of great leaders, there's a lot of great policy initiatives that the Republicans can run. I'm confident that they'll have a resilient party that'll move forward.
Now, Paul Ryan has been one of those who have been lukewarm about Donald Trump, the House Speaker. Does he survive this? Does he have a position in the party coming out of the election?
Absolutely. Speaker Ryan has a thankless job. He's got a really tough job to do, but people really respect him. He's going to have to put a coalition together, and he can. He's an amazing leader, and he'll persevere.
Now, Wayne, finally, there's been a lot of discussion about who these Trump supporters are, whether they're traditional Republicans or whether they're new to the party. What's your observation?
I think it's all of the above. I think you have new people that have felt like politicians on both sides have not listened to them. I've had young African Americans walk into my office in Detroit and say they want to get involved in the Trump campaign because they don't trust Hillary. There's a lot of distrust in my community in regards to Hillary Clinton.
Will they stay with the party once the election's over, if Trump doesn't win?
That's a good question. We'll have to see after Tuesday. But I mean, a lot of these people are definitely Trump supporters first and not necessarily party people.
Well, thanks, Stephen. You've got another guest.
I do. There's been a tireless media coverage campaign during this campaign, and throughout it all, some people have actually blamed the media for giving Trump too much attention or not holding Clinton accountable. How has media coverage shaped this election? With me now is WDIV Channel 4 anchor Devin Skillian. Devin, welcome.
Hey, Stephen. It's always good to be back with you.
So I waited a long time to ask you this question in front of a camera. Why are you doing such a bad job?
You know, it's a really good question, but I have told you quite seriously that when all this is over, the press really needs, we've got a lot of soul searching to do. We're in a bit of a crisis. We did help create the Trump candidacy at the expense of all of those other Republican candidates early on. I can't think of anybody else that Meet the Press would take on the phone, but they were willing to do that with Donald Trump. We also, though, have reached what I call a post-truth world, where you've got an awful lot of the media trying to do the fact-finding and the truth-telling and say, well, this isn't true, but this is, and people aren't believing us. And that's a real crisis for journalism.
Yeah. So how do you pull it back? I mean, we won't see, I don't think, another campaign quite like that of Donald Trump anytime soon. I mean, there is an anomalous sort of dynamic to this. I mean, I've used this analogy before. It's sort of a little like watching Oldsmobiles run off the line in an auto plant, and all of a sudden there's this other strange vehicle that's got the wheels on the top, and maybe it's on fire, but everyone wants it all of a sudden. Everyone's buying it. I mean, there was sort of necessary attention paid to him. How do you sort of deal with that after the election?
Well, it's really difficult to think of us all dealing with it as one. I always laugh when people talk about the media's agenda. You get 5 reporters together, they can't even agree on what to have for lunch. And if there is an agenda, nobody's including me on the emails, or I'm not going to the meetings.
Don't say emails in this
Yes, you're good point, fair point, good point. Sorry. But I also, it is kind of nuts, though, the way that we've ended up where we are today, given that we rely, our stock and trade really is sort of the idea of the truth, and yet there's no premium on that. Now, when you say that you don't think that we'll have another candidacy like this, I do think that we have found, that the politicians have found there is another way, and that is to go all the way around us. And the candidates of the future will be people like Donald Trump, who have, 22 million Twitter followers, and people like Hillary Clinton, who really don't talk to reporters.
Right. I mean,
she really hasn't done a news conference in ages.
Right. I mean, it's one of the things that has been sort of overlooked here is her truculence with the press, which is long-standing. So what do you do if you're us, or you, I should say? How do you regain people's trust after something like this? Is it about changing coverage, or is it about the way we think about or present the coverage?
Well, I certainly think that we need to be more serious within the industry about the way that we've gotten to the point where we kind of have amused ourselves to death. I always tell people that when I was in journalism school, I was taught that the primary function of a journalist was to go out and find the things that are important and then come back and try to make them interesting. Today we get it backwards. We go out, we find crap that's interesting, and we try to make it seem important. And that is a terrible conundrum we have placed ourselves in. People always say to me, well, you know, journalism's a business. It's true, it's a business, but there's a reason why it's the only business mentioned by name in the Constitution. We got to get this right.
All right, Devin Skillian, anchor at Channel 4 WDIV in Detroit. Thanks for being here.
As always, a pleasure.
All right, back to Christy.
All right, thanks, Stephen and Devin. You know, we've talked so much about how this election is historical in several ways, including should Hillary Clinton win, she would be the first female president. And it got me to thinking about her candidacy and if it would change the way other women candidates are perceived, and if it would encourage more women to run for office. Joining me now is a woman who is running for office right now, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. It's good to see you, Congressman. Thanks for stopping by. First off, you know, this election season has been termed the season of the woman, not just because we've got a woman who's the head of a major party, but also the way women have been talked about in this election, and also the way female voters have been targeted and how important they are. How would you describe, is this the election of the woman, would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say that women voters have been important in many elections in the last few years, and what does make it different is the fact that we again have a woman candidate who may actually become president of the United States. I always say I am not voting for Hillary Clinton because she's a woman. I'm voting for Hillary Clinton because she's the most qualified person for the job. But I think Michelle Obama was eloquent at the Democratic Convention when she talked about this candidacy, and when we do elect her tomorrow, will mean that our sons and our daughters and all of our, in the future, never have to wonder whether a woman can be president of the United States again. And quite frankly, I think we need more women in government, in politics, because I think women bring a different perspective.
Why don't we have more women in politics? Now, if things go the way people are projecting, that we might have the largest congressional delegation of women that we've had in a long time in Washington, but historically it has been very difficult to encourage women to run. Why would you say that is?
Well, I think there are many reasons. One is the raising of money and the network of people, the connections. It's very, and women tend to not like to ask for money. I hate it. It's the worst part of my job. But also, women continue to be the multitaskers, the caregivers. We have to make sure that everything gets done. So I think a lot of women are reluctant because they think they have to do everything to put themselves out there. Though I think that's what makes women strong candidates, because they are multitaskers, and I think they try to solve problems, and we need more problem solvers.
Regardless of party, do you believe that Hillary Clinton's candidacy has changed the way that people perceive women running for office at all?
I think this election has been one of the most unique elections we have ever seen. I think that her candidacy is wrapped up in more than just gender. But yes, I do think that people see this is the most. Barack Obama said it today when he was in Ann Arbor, and he's repeatedly said it. This woman is more prepared to be president of the United States than any candidate in the history of the United States of America.
It's interesting. The New York Times had a poll commissioned for them within the last week that polled actually 14 to 17-year-old girls, and they said that 22% of them said that Hillary Clinton's candidacy, just her candidacy, and again, we're not looking at either party, but her candidacy would encourage them to have some kind of leadership roles when they got older. Does that number surprise you? Do you think it should be a little higher?
I wish it was higher. Even when you talk about there'll be more women in the Congress, if we're lucky, we represent more than 50% of the population, and the numbers are supposed to be representative, reflective of the population. So I'm happy that young women now think they can be president or anything they want to be, but we need to encourage more women to be anything they want to be.
Does it surprise you? Has there been any kind of tone change or anything different about the way women have been talked about when we talk about Donald Trump or when we talk about Hillary Clinton in this election season that has surprised you or bothered you or made you say, oh no, we're right on target here?
No, there's nothing about this election that I feel like we're right on target. The thing that bothers me the most about this election is the lack of civility, the name calling. How is it? It's like there's a license to use language that's inappropriate. It is not okay to call somebody Miss Piggy. It is not okay to attack someone because of their sex. And you know, when you saw Michelle Obama, there are many women of my generation that remember what sexual harassment was like, and it's not okay, and I am glad to see women of all ages stand up and say, it's not okay, and that's what's wrong about Donald Trump.
And I hope that we have a larger conversation about that in the coming weeks. Thanks so much. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell running for office.
Thank you very much.
All right, Nolan, I'm going to send it over to you.
Thanks, Christy. I am here with our resident Macomb County expert, Melissa Roy, Director of Advanced Macomb. And Macomb County, we've not heard a whole lot about it outside the county, but you've got one of the more interesting local races and one of the more expensive. Over $3 million has been spent on the water resource director race between Candace Miller and Anthony Maraca. What in the world is going on there, and what would make that office so important that candidates are willing to spend that kind of money?
Well, Nolan, I think several things are going on. One, water is the most important thing in Macomb County. Hands down, Lake St. Clair and the Clinton River are two of the most important resources in Macomb County, and this office is extremely important to the integrity of those bodies of water. You know, living in southeast Michigan and the state of Michigan, it's important to keep our waterways clean. And I think what we saw with the Flint water crisis, if we don't watch what's going on with our water, we're in big trouble. So I think that explains it.
And your old boss, Mark Hackle, really put his governor's hopes at risk by endorsing the Republican in the race. Why did he do that?
Well, I don't think Mark put anything at risk. I think Mr. Hackle is known for his bipartisan leanings, and that's really reflective of Macomb. Macomb's a bipartisan swing county.
And as Macomb goes, so goes the nation, right, in terms of the presidential race?
well, we shall see.
Okay. Christy, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Nolan and Melissa. Let's turn our focus now to Detroit and a very important school board election. Since the creation of a new Detroit school district this summer, the elected school board will have decision-making power over academics and the superintendent for the first time in years. There will still be financial oversight, but the job is a pivotal one. And with 63 candidates running for 7 spots, voters have a big decision.
To have the focus on the students, ensuring that they provide the best opportunities for the students to get a good quality education.
To act as good fiduciary stewards of the district's resources, to manage the resources provided for educating and maintaining the facilities.
Selecting a superintendent, and the superintendent has to have a single purpose, and that is educating our students.
Should be conscious of the policies and procedures that are put in place to allow the superintendent to do his or her job.
Provide oversight and make sure that there are the right programs, the right kind of facilities, the environment.
The school board has the final say in all of the decisions made in the district.
We need people from all walks. It could be a parent. It could be an educator. We could have a diverse group of people.
It should be people who have already done quite a bit in their lives, in my opinion, and are willing to give back from what they've learned and from what they have.
Look at what they have done to help kids, to help students, to help people in our community.
People who have a passion, who have a drive, who have the strength to stand against those who will come against the children through contracts and agenda motivations, and ensure that not only are we working with the resources that we have, but are willing to develop relationships.
Board members should look at every possible way to ensure a good learning environment by supporting the superintendent, by supporting programs for the students, and obviously ensuring that the parents feel welcome.
Who are team players, who are willing to follow the laws of the states and the municipalities.
If any of the potential school board members did not take the time to fill out questionnaires, I would definitely eliminate each person who did not feel that this was a priority.
When you get literature, you may want to verify the accuracy of what you read.
If anyone feels that they will be wielding power as a result of being a school board member, I would be very concerned.
Your personal agenda might be to use the school board as a stepping stone.
The stepping stone to some other opportunity, some political opportunity. And just because you've heard their name does not mean that that is the person you should give your vote to. Don't give it away.
Okay, joining me now is Sheila Cockrell. She is head of Citizen Detroit, an initiative out of Wayne State University to educate residents on the candidates and the need for a quality school board. Sheila, welcome to MiWeek.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so you've spent a lot of time trying to get information about these candidates, trying to get these candidates in touch with residents who are going to be voting for them. I have said a couple times that I'm impressed by the overall quality of the people who are running. We have 63 candidates. I would say somewhere between 20, 25 of them are really, really high quality hopefuls. I think that's different for a Detroit school board election. Oftentimes we're dealing with a different kind of caliber of candidate. I'm wondering what your impression has been.
Absolutely. I mean, what we saw at Citizen Detroit was a range of really thoughtful people who were thinking first of children and of education, and really wanting to understand the role of a school board in terms of setting policy and not about awarding contracts or shifts in power. I think there's a real opportunity here. There's a ton of really good candidates who are really serious about the educational crisis in the city and educating children in Detroit.
Yeah, and there's a broad spectrum of among that quality, right? You got some folks who are union folks, you got some folks who are community folks, you got some folks who are just parents or educators. We have a lot of people to choose from. My worry is going in and picking 7 instead of maybe picking 12. I mean, I think that's sort of the dilemma that some voters will face.
Yes, I agree. I mean, there really is a wide spectrum of people who are running, who represent really the best Detroit has to offer. There are tons of really, really qualified people who want to do public service. The problem is, and I guess this is the same everywhere, is breaking through kind of the political class, the infrastructure that kind of, moves the pieces on the chessboard and decides who's going to be endorsed and who's not. So there's a wide range of groups endorsing, some new entities endorsing this year, and some new slates. There were a number of really creative slates that have come together with really interesting groups of people. There's just a plethora of really good choices for DPS.
Yeah. So I've heard from a lot of folks who say, we already have a school board. They were elected by the people in Detroit. They're being replaced by this new board because of the legislation. But why shouldn't we first consider them as people who should sit on this board? Those are the people Detroiters have chosen. What's the reason to either do that or not, in your judgment?
Well, I think the conditions under which the last elected board were serving was one of sort of really political warfare, and that the focus of people running had a lot to do with questions of power and control. I don't think that really serves in the long term, hasn't historically served Detroit students well. I don't think it would continue to. So, I mean, I really think the focus should be on new blood, next generation, new leadership. There's there's phenomenal young people, some 30, people in their late 20s, early 30s, folks who are retirees. There's a wide spectrum of folks who represent new blood for the city.
Yeah. As I said, you've had some forums with candidates and voters. What are the things that you're hearing from people in the city who are making this choice about what they expect or what they're looking for in board candidates?
Well, first of all, I mean, we did a kind of speed dating, and the Free Press was one of our partners in this. We really have gotten wonderful feedback, interestingly enough, both from candidates and residents. Residents love the fact that they could have a policy conversation. You don't have somebody standing up and saying, if you elect me, I'm going to, every kid's going to graduate from high school like in 6 months. Whether they're just wild promises, you could actually have a substantive conversation. Candidates liked it because they felt that it was fair, that there was no agenda, that there was no group behind it pushing one group or another group. People really found it to be a really good experience. So what we heard from people a lot was people wanted to understand how candidates saw their role as on the school board as opposed to running the school system. That's a real issue.
That's one of the issues we have with school boards around the state, frankly, is they don't really understand sometimes what their role is. What did residents say about the continued state oversight, which is also an issue here in Detroit, the fact that Detroiters don't have the same control over their schools that voters in other districts have? Was that a major concern?
There was certainly the sort of the overall message was emergency management didn't work, it failed, get rid of it. On the question of financial oversight, there seemed to be sort of a mixed message. It seems to be working for the city, with the City of Detroit's relationship with the Financial Review Commission. So I think there's some people who believe that it's probably a good idea in this period of transition, but ultimately the goal should be, in any circumstance, that a city be fully autonomous and independent in the exercise of its local power.
All right. Sheila Cockrell of Citizen Detroit, thanks for being here on MiWeek.
My pleasure.
All right, back to Christy.
All right, thanks, Stephen and Sheila. For years, Southeast Michigan has not been able to agree on a regional transit system. Now a proposal is on the ballot that would be the beginning of a large and coordinated effort to connect Southeast Michigan. Here's a look at how voters think about transit in our area.
Are you going to vote?
Yes, I'm voting. They had the trolley, the trains, and all that, but I think it's a good thing.
Suddenly they find money to do it again. I don't understand it.
We live like in Monroe, but it'd be nice if there was a bus to take or a transit to get all the way in here instead of driving.
Once it's done, are my children going to be able to afford it? That's one thing I need to know.
What can you accomplish now you couldn't accomplish then?
When there is more public transit, more money for it, it will eventually draw people.
If it's $7 each way, there's no way that I'm going to be able to afford that.
Do you think that'll help mend any of the racial and economic divides between the suburbs and the city of Detroit?
I doubt it because it goes deep into transportation. So, who knows?
I think it's a way to further separate those that are economically privileged and those that aren't.
Unless the divisions, class divisions, racial divisions have something to do with it.
They're doing it not for our schooling. They can be educated with the different race.
It would help people maybe come from the suburbs to the city. I just don't know how much people go from the city to the suburbs unless they're working.
But that's to be determined, I guess, when this stuff is done.
Joining me now to take a look at the RTA proposal on the ballot is Tiffany Gunter, the Deputy CEO of the Regional Transit Authority, and Leon Drolet, who is with the group NoMassiveTransitTax.org. You know, Tiffany, I've always said that Detroit built mass transit a long time ago. It's called freeways. We've probably got more freeways anywhere else in the country, and we move a lot of people around on those freeways every day. But you say we've come to the point where that's no longer good enough if we hope to be a growing competitive region. What's the case for this new transit tax, and what will the money be used for?
Absolutely. So you can't build yourself out of congestion. That's something that we've seen in major metropolitan areas across the nation. And the case for rapid transit or regional transit is so strong because right now we have 92% of the jobs in this region cannot be reached in under an hour using the existing public transit options that are available. And what the RTA plan does, it connects up these communities in a really realistic way that maximizes efficient use of the system and connects seniors and people with disabilities to having independence and connects people to jobs and entertainment and everything that you need to live life.
And Leon, you're fighting that proposal. This would put a lot more buses on the road, hopefully take people out of cars and out of parking lots. What is wrong with that idea?
Well, first, experience shows that doesn't work. In communities that are outside of the congested East Coast pre-car communities like Washington, D.C., New York, people aren't getting on mass transit no matter how much more money is dumped into it. This proposal will actually make transportation commuting worse in Metro Detroit because part of the plan is to close lanes on major roads like Woodward, Gratiot, Michigan Avenue, close lanes to make bus-only lanes that'll congest cars into fewer lanes and make it harder to get around. Plus, Metro Detroit is not Washington, D.C. It is not New York. It is a spread out community. There's no evidence that if you build it, they will come. We look at that now. The millage for mass transit doubled in 2014, well, almost doubled, went from 0.69 mils to a mil, and ridership dropped in the subsequent years by 300,000 rides.
Okay, now, Tiffany, when you talk about what this system will do, it's designed to move within the region, isn't it? And will it serve 90% of people in this region, as to Leon's point, don't ride a bus. Will this system encourage them to get on the bus for their daily commute?
Absolutely. So what we have here is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The system doesn't go beyond jurisdictional boundaries. What we've seen across the nation is that when a system is truly connected regionally, over the last 10 years, 20% increases in ridership, and you can find that on the American Public Transportation Association website. Increases in ridership are connected to increases in reliability, frequency, safety, and all those things are included in the RTA plan. We also have park and rides associated with those lanes. And just to address what Mr. DeLay has said about destroying traffic, Michigan Department of Transportation sits on every one of our advisory committees, and they don't allow that to happen. You have to keep a certain level of service. And with BRT systems, bus rapid transit systems, you can keep flowing with the vehicle because you have signal preemption. It actually improves travel for people in their automobiles.
Now, Leon, one of the concerns I've had about this proposal is, we're already paying a smart tax in this region. People in Detroit already pay to fund DDOT. And now we're going to have yet a third tax to fund a third authority. What is your confidence level that we'll be able to coordinate these three systems into one cohesive transportation system?
Well, I think they will be able to coordinate things, but there's no reason they needed $4.7 billion to have a bus cross 8 Mile Road. I mean, that's an outrageous assessment that it takes billions of dollars to have a bus cross a road. When we have a situation like in Detroit, for example, there's a city ordinance that prohibits SMART from dropping off a passenger or picking up a passenger in the city. That bureaucracy has been the problem. It hasn't been really the lack of resources. It's been a lack of willingness to coordinate those resources and doubling the money after the service we got is not working.
Thanks. One last question, Tiffany. We got Lyft, got Uber, all sorts of these mobility options coming, going to get bigger in the future. Do we still need buses? Are buses going to be relevant in the new mobility future?
Emphatically, yes. You have to have a foundation for those systems to work. Uber will tell you themselves they need a strong foundation to carry people using their newer technology. So the foundation has to be there. That's what makes New York and Chicago hum with Uber and Lyft.
And if it doesn't pass this time, what happens?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a long time before this opportunity and this momentum comes back again. So we do urge people to vote yes on regional transit.
Okay, Christy, thank you guys, and back to you.
All right, thanks, Nolan. You know, elections often make us look ahead and think about leadership and possibility. So take a listen to what Detroiters are hoping to see happen in their city.
What is Detroit? Who's it for? And where is it?
You need help in the city. Things is getting better. Yeah. We just leave them a little more jobs. I'm hoping for the better.
I think the future is going to be great. Going to be more jobs for not just black people.
Keep these guys off the street, you know, doing wrong, and everything will be better.
Equality, more jobs.
I don't think we've, you know, with all the reconnoitering and reconfiguring and redeveloping and re-reing, what defines Detroit?
You know, for the whole community, for everybody, it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
You know, a lot of focus is on the presidential race, but many decisions that will directly impact our lives rest with our lawmakers in Lansing. There are several competitive House races, and Democrats are looking to gain a few more seats. So what will be on the political agenda this coming year in our state? And how did this election year set up the governor's race in 2018? For all things state politics, let's bring in John Truscott and Kelly Rossman-McKinney of Truscott-Rossman. It's good to see both of you.
Good to be seen.
You know, and we are on the second floor of the lovely Whitney, and you guys have been hanging around for a while, just waiting for the last segment to come on, right, John?
Are we going to be able to get on?
Yes. All right. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about state politics and the fact that Democrats are trying to pick up some extra seats in the House to try to shift a little bit of balance. What are the odds here, Kelly?
Well, they have to pick up 9 seats to pull back the majority for Democrats, and they've not had the majority in 6 years. I don't really see them pulling 9, but I expect that they'll pick up quite a few seats. It's hard to, I find it very hard to think they'll get 9, but it'd be nice to see.
What do you think, Sean?
The consensus is probably 3 to 4 seats, somewhere in that range. Not nearly enough to pull a majority, but going forward, we'll see if the two sides are willing to work a little bit better together than they have in the past.
Okay, so that's my next question. When the dust kind of settles a little bit, it will sort of set what the agenda will be, or maybe what we'll see in lame duck, do you think, coming up?
Lame duck, there will be 3 or 4 main issues. They'll hit it hard, be done by mid-December. Corrections reform is one of those issues. There are a few education issues to wrap up, energy reform. That's kind of the top of the items, and then we'll see who wants to wrap up a few legacy items before they leave.
All right, what do you think that we can see coming up in lame duck in terms of issues?
Well, he named the issues. Those issues won't change. I do think you'll have a real interesting approach to education. I keep hearing that there will yet be discussion about an education commission, so that'll be interesting, whether that's limited to Detroit or they look at that statewide. But lame duck's really interesting because you have people who aren't coming back. they know they're not coming back, and they vote their conscience more than anything else. It's pretty cool to see.
It's an interesting, maybe a freeing feeling for them. So people will look forward and say, then, what kind of agenda can we see in the state of Michigan, and what are going to be the priorities in our state now coming in 2017?
You know, that's going to be really interesting, given that Governor Snyder is going to be in his last 2 years. So does the legislature pull away, start setting their own agenda? I think we go back to kind of the key issues in this state. It's jobs, the economy, it'll be education, funding for education and higher ed. Those I think will dominate early on, depending on what happens nationally with the economy.
All right, what do you think, Kelly?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see what Bill Schuette continues to do to position himself in a gubernatorial avenue and use Flint water, continue to use Flint water, and use it over and over and over again, so that he really positions himself to run for governor.
Okay, so let's talk about the governor's race, because I think it's become very interesting. How has this election, John, how would you describe how this election has brought out who you're seeing now candidate-wise? And you've mentioned Bill Schuette, the Attorney General, and some people are looking at maybe Brian Calley, but the fact that he did not endorse Trump and pulled back, maybe that people are saying, well, maybe he might sit out 2018.
Yeah, I think everybody's been kind of hedging their bets, kind of waiting to see what would happen with this election. It's been an anomaly type of election where there's a lot of unpredictability. So do you go out, do you support, does that cost you votes? And in some legislative races, the fact that they weren't supporting the party's nominee, yeah, it could cost them. So remains to be seen, like with so much of this election, but the dust will settle and we'll move on.
All right, so let's talk about the Democrats a little bit in terms of looking at the governor's office in 2018. What are you seeing coming out?
I'm seeing candidates who will beat whoever the Republicans bring up. It will be.
Tell us how you really feel, Kelly.
It'll either be Gretchen Whitmer or Dan Kildee.
And you think he's going to have, those are the two that will have the strongest momentum?
That's the consensus odds-on candidates. They're both solid. The Republicans have solid candidates. Unless somebody emerges out of left field that we can't predict, I think that's the field right now.
Okay, so I'm going to give you guys both the shot to kind of give me what your feelings have been looking at the presidential election now in this past year and how we've finally come to this point. John, I'm going to let you go first.
I don't think there's any path for Trump to get the 270 necessary electoral votes.
That's it?
Yeah.
Michigan, totally.
Michigan may be close, but Hillary still wins it.
All right, Kelly.
I'm with her. Vote for Hillary.
There you go. All right. Kelly Rossman McKinney, John Truscott, thanks so much for joining me. We appreciate it. You know, all right, so here are some of the other races that you should be watching for on Tuesday. There are several congressional races to keep your eye on. In the 7th District, Democrat State Representative Gretchen Driscoll taking on Republican Congressman Tim Walberg, and it has been a pricey and intense fight there. Make sure you check out the 1st District that covers the UP and the Northern Lower Peninsula between Democrat Lon Johnson, Republican Jack Bergman. People are watching voting trends. They're watching Oakland County, and they're watching the executives race there, where L. Brooks Patterson wants to hang on to his seat against opponent Vicki Barnett. And the race for Macomb County Public Works Commissioner that we've been talking about, it hasn't been for the faint of heart. Congresswoman Candace Miller challenging incumbent Anthony Morocco. And on the millage front, Wayne County voters have to decide on a $2 mil increase for schools. So make sure that you're watching those races tomorrow. All right, so Stephen and Nolan are back to wrap everything up. So kind of what are your, I guess, your last minute thoughts, some of the stuff that you heard here tonight and as we go forward tomorrow?
It's interesting. Our pollster, Richard Schuba, walked in during the show, and I got a chance to talk with him while you were talking to John and Kelly and ask him why the attention on Michigan, and his thoughts were sort of in line with Steve's. He looks at Michigan as being a last chance for Donald Trump. He's in trouble in the South, he's in trouble in Florida, in Nevada, places where Republicans traditionally do well, and sort of Michigan was the last opportunity to be a stopgap in this thing. So he's not a believer that the election is as close as we've been thinking it has been over the last few days.
Interesting. All right, so what are some of your last minute thoughts here?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with Nolan that the attention we've gotten has been a lot of fun, and that's really, it makes it interesting in the last few days. But in the end, I think it will be for not very much. Hillary Clinton will win Michigan, I think, pretty easily. The question tomorrow will be, what effect does that have, if any, on other races? I say keep an eye on Oakland County. White, educated women, I think, are getting out the whooping stick tomorrow in Oakland County for Donald Trump.
Is that a technical term?
Yes, and they may use it on L. Brooks Patterson as well. That's not been talked about a whole lot in this election, we'll have to see how that turns out.
You know, and when the dust all settles, we're going to have to talk about how everyone starts to work together again in Washington, and I think that'll end up being the next chapter. But you can't laugh, Nolan. Can we glasses half full on this?
Scoffing.
When's that ever happened?
Well,
I mean,
you know,
it's certainly not been the norm over the last 12 years. I think we are at the most divided point as a nation that we've been since the Civil War. You look at the ABC poll out today, 97% of people detest the candidate they're not voting for. I don't know how you put this back together.
Well, then, you know what? We got a lot of work to do. All right, and that is going to do for our MiWeek election special. Make sure you vote tomorrow, and then come back and join us Thursday night at 7:30 at our regular time when we help you make sense of it all. A big thank you to the great folks at the Whitney for having us, and for our audience tonight for being with us, and for all of us at Detroit Public TV. I'm Christy McDonald. Have a great night. We'll see you next time on MiWeek. Take care.
From the moment you wake up till you turn out the light, Masco is proud to be part of your everyday life. When you turn on the faucet for a cool drink of water, open a kitchen cabinet to set the family table, or freshen up a room with a new coat of paint, you do it all with Masco products. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.